Hey YouTube, good morning. This is Mark Learns Tech. It's March 31st, 2023. And for those of you who are new to my channel, about 3 or 4 months ago, I decided to finance a laptop and start learning more about tech. I've had multiple jobs and I'm currently working in law enforcement, which is probably the best job I've ever had thus as far as I want to say with everything, with pay, with um, like stress level, work-life balance. That could be kind of tough, but that's got nothing to do with the job. That's more on me. So because I'm a single parent, sometimes it poses a challenge with having to navigate when when I have time for my family. Um, but especially my son. But nonetheless, still one of the best jobs out there that I've had. And yeah, I decided to learn more about um, all things tech, specifically, which these days, depending on who you follow and your experience in tech, you know that IT is a dying field and one of the emerging areas to look into that's growing and continually changing is programming. Specifically, well, right now what's real big is artificial intelligence. But that's before I can get there, I decided to look into Python, which is it's what's called called a multi-purpose programming language. And so this is so much different than the computer courses my dad took when he was in college. But nonetheless, it's been tricky for sure just to even learn the syntax, which is like the A, B's, and C's and how to form a sentence in this programming language. But nonetheless, in this particular video, I am learning. I think it's a continued assignment on lists, and so right here there's they're basically making me put together a series of lists for a store, an online store that contains the name of the customer, the size of this hypothetical shirt that they're going to buy, and whether or not they're going to opt in for the shipping option. And I think so. Right here it says basically if they're going to go with the shipping or not, you would put true or false. Obviously, this is significantly dumbed down because Code Academy wants you to they want you to understand the fundamentals of this stuff before even getting into the more complex concepts. But I mean, this alone, it I would argue takes a little bit of time just to understand before you got into the meat and potatoes of it. And so it's why it's so important to pick this part up. But so in this particular recording, I was hitting my head against the wall because I think this is it. So right here there is an existing list and it wants you to combine them. So within Python, there's this concept known as concatenate. And so they basically said, okay, here's a list, but then we want you to add this to an existing list. So we're going to combine two lists essentially. And I want to say I spent, not even kidding you, I spent an hour. People always talk about, like, I see all these TikToks of people going, like, when you've been staring at the screen for 3 hours and all you missed was like a comma or something like that. And it's true, man. Like, sometimes you'll be looking at this thing and you're like, what the fuck? Like, I got the variable, I got this, I got my quotes. It's like it could be right, like 99% right, but it's always missing one fucking um what is it? Parentheses or something like that. And that's really important, right? I mean, that's without that the program's going to tell you. And that's the good thing about this. So I don't know, I mean, I don't have any experience in other programs other than Python. And when I had first started looking into this, there's a handful of YouTubers of YouTube programmers like professional programmers who work for major companies like Microsoft. Well, this one kid, Kevin Stratford, this young guy who throws a bunch of content on there. Um, I had followed him, and they sort of give you the fundamentals of uh, they give you the core concepts to understand, which is what a concept is, which is what a variable is, what a string is, and so forth. And so I was trying to go back to all the previous notes I had taken on with just YouTube concepts that I had learned, and I had like actually jotted down and started to pick up to memorize by downloading what's the program? I think it's Visual Studio Code, VSC, and just typing everything into the, I guess the, like the run terminal. It looks like a terminal, and then pressing run and see what happens. And so what ends up happening is I spent almost an hour forgetting that there was a certain, so in addition to combining these lists, there's also ways to modify them. So like let's say you have a list and it's got like, well, in this case, the first one is customer data, and then the second one is customer data final, which is the second one. But I had forgotten to, because sometimes I just like to fuck with it and see what it does. And one of the tasks was to change indices 3, which is the way you write it, or what I've been learning so far is that everything's written in like in sequence, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but everything starts at 0. And I had had a little bit of trouble memorizing, okay, is this is it this indice or is it that indice? Because sometimes it'll be like whenever you're doing negatives, it's different or some shit like that. And so whenever it asked me to remove a string or like a letter of text, I kind of said, okay, well, what happens if I remove this one? What happens if I remove that one? And it ended up just being that I had fucked with a previous task, and that threw the entire code off. And so my when it had asked me to concatenate the two lists, it was on point, but a previous fucking thing that I out of my own free will decided to change had fucked everything up for me, and I was like kicking myself in the fucking in the leg. And luckily, this that's what I really like about these guys. This company has like an option that I try very hard not to resort to unless I've like already exhausted all of my options, and then I'll check it out. And in this case, it's called View Solution, and it tells you, okay, step by step, this is the code that you wrote, this is the code that it should be, what it should look like. And it turned out like I went like literally line per line, text per text, and it was like, oh, okay, it was this fucking value that I had changed. And I think it was customer data indice one dot remove, and I had removed something else instead of, excuse me, instead of what it had originally told me to. But nonetheless, I went ahead and corrected it, and everything came out fine. But it's crazy, man. Like you'll be stuck on this fucking on something for a while, and you're like, a part of me is like, man, it's crazy. I'm sure somewhere there's a guy in an office who's just like smacking his head against the table because he can't, for whatever reason, he can't find something out. And here I am working on this like it's like a programming on training wheels. But it's, this is I think I want to believe that this is what he went through, as a rookie as well. But this is cool, man. I really get a lot of enjoyment out of this. Um, I think I'm still working on lists at this point. I'm about 20%, 30% into the Python course on Code Academy. Really recommend other people to check it out if you guys are interested. I I don't know if I'll ever do anything with this. I'd like to think I might use it for something on my own. So I recently also started to focus more on my personal finance, and I had also worked on like my expenses, and I went blank there for a second. And I thought, okay, well, let me see what where I can cut costs. I recently had a significant life change, or I should call it a reduction in earnings. And so, well, it wasn't a reduction. It was actually a garnishment, but that's another story. And so I decided to say, okay, well, let me put everything in an Excel spreadsheet and see what it is, you know. And I found some areas where I can cut, and so that got me really into like that data analysis and looking into like, okay, I mean, it's crazy. I wish I could show you guys, but I mean, there are things that I think we should keep private. I was spending, I will share this with you though. I was spending, not even kidding you, in probably through a lot of 2022, more in coffees than I was in on my car. So I have a used Toyota Camry. I'll throw a picture up on here so you guys can check it out. I took a badass picture in near a coffee shop in Weslaco, and I you know, it's a very modest car. It's actually the base model, but it's my car. I financed it under my name. I got a good rate on it and super reliable. It's worlds better than what I used to have. And my car payment is under 300 bucks. So I mean that lets you know, it's certainly not winning any contests. It's not the last name in luxury, but it's, you know, takes me from here to work. I can travel with it, super reliable. And it's crazy to think that I was spending more in iced caramel macchiatos and uh, medium iced brevets than I was on my car payment, you know? So I thought, you know what? Let me see what I can do with that in order to cut costs. And maybe not eliminate it because I mean, I'm not going to drop caffeine, but nonetheless, I'm going to see if I can cut from expenses on drinking coffee, maybe cut expenses on eating out. So essentially, I decided to start looking at my expenses and, you know, basically start making coffee at home. It's still iced coffee, by the way. And so it's still decent. I just have to work. I just have to work for it now. I have to make it. It's a lot better whenever somebody else makes your coffee. But unfortunately, that is not the move right now. So yeah, so that's what really got me into that's what kind of that was like the bug that bit me that got me into it. It's basically working on my personal finances and understanding where my money's going. And I was like, man, I really like this looking at, okay, how many times do I go here? And it was crazy. Like every month I was spending damn near the exact same, with the exception of like maybe 50 or like 70, 60 cents on coffees. And I was like, shit, I'm pretty predictable. Like there's a number of how many coffees I'm spending, and yeah, it was like buying two coffees a day. Um, one after my workout, b- um, bef- as I in the morning, and then one on my way to work so that I could drink um like around 8 o'clock at night, so that by the time I got out, it would kind of like carry me through the night because I work evenings, and so um that was essentially my how I got into this stuff. And so if you guys are for those who are trying to keep up with the video, I went ahead and sped it up. I wasn't gonna just have an hour long video and put you guys through that, but essentially I'm able to. So this is the part where I look at the code and identify what was it that I was doing differently. And so So yeah, that got me really interested in learning this stuff. I'm gonna I'm gonna say I don't know about you guys, but I've been seeing a lot of this lately. There's been so much emphasis on like boot camps and learn Python, be a software developer, be a programmer. I feel like this is getting to the point where, like, whenever people can't sell, and then and instead what they do is they teach you how to sell. I feel like maybe people just know the fundamentals of coding, and then they're saying, well, I can't code for a company, so let me just teach somebody to code. And I'm like, a part of me is feeling like, man, like maybe we're kind of wasting our times here. Um, Although the good part about this is you do learn a little, it does teach you how to think. So that part's pretty good. And I mean, you do get that from it. And I'm sure the way I see it is at the very least, if I ever decided to change careers or do a lateral transfer from like law enforcement to like maybe the analytical side of law enforcement, maybe like crime statistics or something like that, I could always take this and like it looks good on a resume. If I would argue, if you're a supervisor at Costco and you've got, I don't know, 5 years experience, you've, so, air quotes, earned your stripes, you've stuck around long enough, and then you throw like, oh, I know this programming language, I know how to do this, I know how to manipulate data. I feel like it's a good selling point. I don't know. What do I know? But I really started to focus more on the channel since there's no deadline to finish your stuff. I mean, Code Academy gives you like this hypothetical, oh, you've done this much a day, you've got 3 days to go, but they don't penalize you for taking longer. And I feel like this is what makes it fun. Whenever you get to learn something at your own pace and you're not fucking pressed and, oh, do this. And in my opinion, we'll see, you learn it better because you're actually taking the time to see, okay, does this look good? Does this look good? Does this look good? And so this is where I'm at, folks. Still putting together lists on Python. Um, I think there's like an actual fully fledged, let me see. It's like a fully fledged assignment, like a project. And so I think this might incorporate a bunch of stuff. Well, it says a lesson, working with lists in Python. Oh, no, no, the lessons later on. So I'm going to document that and see how that goes. That one's going to be more, I'm going to make a bigger deal out of that one, the whole project. But thanks for tuning in. This was Mark Learns Tech, down reporting from Brownsville, Texas, which is near SpaceX. Something maybe you guys didn't know that SpaceX they've got an office here. They've got a branch. What do they call it? SpaceX. I don't even know a launch site, right? Yeah, that's what it is. It's a SpaceX launch facility, Boca Chica Boulevard. Nice. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys have um anything to share in the comments, if you guys are learning something as well, if you guys are uh maybe thinking of transitioning careers. I say this in every video, but if you're thinking of maybe you've been at your place too long, maybe you're considering, maybe you want to stay, but you want to be in a different area, maybe like on the tech side of things. A lot of people work in healthcare, a lot of people work in finance, but maybe you're done with being a number cruncher or you're done wearing the scrubs and you want to move on into the office and maybe be a data analyst or an IT professional, software developer, software engineer. Um, I highly recommend taking a before even committing to something like a class, take a look on YouTube. Maybe see if that's something you might even enjoy. Right now I have I have a little bit of a luxury where in my job I'm kind of on my feet and I'm outside. I'm in the environments, but I'm also uh indoor, right? As a law enforcement officer, you get it's kind of tricky. It's like is it blue collar, is it white collar? Back then it was looked at as blue collar. Um but it is premier, so it's a little bit different. You know, when you're working for the federal government, it's they think things out. You're not exposed. Well, you are exposed, make no mistake, but it's not it's not exactly the same as being a street cop. That's why I give those guys tremendous amount of credit, and you can tell right away who's been a street cop by working where I work because they just conduct themselves differently. But nonetheless, enough of law enforcement. You guys, leave a comment, shoot me a DM, subscribe, follow. Enjoy the rest of your week.